Hey everyone, happy week 6. It's not quite in the books yet, but I wanted to take a moment tonight and talk through some of the top performers from the week 6 main slate and Thursday night and look at the sustainability of these top performers, whether or not they're going to continue to perform in the future, and you know, looking back on how did they do today, and also take some victory laps along the way and some L's as well. That's just how tonight is going to roll. You win some, you lose some, but I'm going to go through the top 10 performers for each of the positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. If you want to chime in and put some players in the comments, we can chat about those as well. But my show sheet is focused primarily on the top performers for today. So Thursday and the Saturday or Sunday, 1:00 and 4:00 Eastern games. I'm not going to, well, maybe we'll see if the Sunday night game is done by the time I finish the live stream, and we can talk about if there were any stud performances. But before hopping on the live stream, I was watching a little bit of the game and also just looked at an update. We're not getting much of a stud update. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott has a touchdown, AJ Brown has a touchdown, Miles Sanders has a touchdown. That's where we're at right now. But none of those players are cracking this elite top 10 right now. Maybe they will by the end of this live stream. Let's hop to it. The quarterback one for right now, going into Sunday Night Football, Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals faced off against the Saints in New Orleans. And Joe Burrow went 28 of 37. He threw for 300 yards. He had 3 touchdowns through the air. He had another rushing touchdown. And 4 rushes, 25 yards. He had a couple longer rushes on the day. He averaged 6 rushing yards per attempt. 32.5 fantasy points. That's your quarterback one. And finally, we get, a breakout game from Joe Burrow. If we look at what he's done through the first 5 weeks, right? Joe Burrow he got to 20 fantasy points against Miami week 4, but that was it. He had cracked 300 passing yards just once, and that was week 1. So this was bringing it all together. In week 5, he had a rushing score. So everything came together for Joe Burrow, and it was that New Orleans was missing so many of its pieces, right? The Saints couldn't sustain the drives that they wanted to. Taysom Hill was kept mostly in check. Chris Olave was out. Michael Thomas was out. Jameis Winston was out. Alvin Kamara did okay. We'll talk about Alvin Kamara later on in the live stream. But Marshawn Lattimore was missing, and Burrow was able to connect with his bud, Jamar Chase, in the locale where they won the national championship. So if you're following the narrative street, Joe Burrow is due for some regression moving forward, but he gets the Atlanta Falcons. That should be a good matchup week 7. This is he's going to go down a little bit because the Falcons, I don't think they're going to give up 303 and 1 rushing score, but Joe Burrow is still going to be a consistently top 8 quarterback moving forward. And I think that Atlanta is going to be a plus matchup for him. I don't think the quarterback 1, though, is going to be what we are expecting for Joe Burrow going into week 7. Perhaps the most surprising quarterback performance of the weekend, Matt Ryan finishes as the quarterback 2 against Jacksonville. This was most surprising because, well, number one, Matt Ryan looked really rusty in previous games. He did not perform the last time that he played Jacksonville. If we look at his performance in week 2 against Jacksonville, he completed 53% of his passes, only 30 attempts. He threw 3 interceptions and scored 1.8 fantasy points. Instead, Matt Ryan bounces back and is the quarterback 2, 27.2 fantasy points, mostly through the air, 58 pass attempts, almost doubled the pass attempts he had in week 2 when Jacksonville faced off against the Indianapolis Colts. 3 passing touchdowns, and we'll talk about a couple of the top performers for the Colts as well. You'll see some correlation there. But Matt Ryan, this was his best performance of the season by far, 27 fantasy points. If we look at his previous games, he hadn't hit higher than 17.8 fantasy points. And then he hasn't had a 27-point game since week 9 of 2021 against New Orleans, where he threw for 2 touchdowns, also had a rushing touchdown, 28.5 fantasy points then. So, Matt Ryan, it looked like he did his homework, he did his studies. It looked like he was a new player in this game, getting the ball to Michael Pittman and Deion Jackson and Jelani Woods. All 3 of the positions were in the top 10. So we'll talk about the Indianapolis Colts more throughout this live stream. But ultimately, I don't think that Matt Ryan, this is not sustainable either. This is not what we had seen. He is facing Tennessee next week, and Tennessee is coming off the bye. So they're going to see that Matt Ryan was able to just pick apart the Jacksonville Jaguars after watching what he was able to do or not able to do week 2. I think that he's going to, fall back to earth as like a mid-pack quarterback too in week 7 against Tennessee. He's hyper-targeted Deion Jackson and Michael Pittman in this game, and Alec Pierce also got pretty involved. So I am concerned that Matt Ryan's just been extremely inconsistent so far. 2 games below 7 fantasy points coming into week 6. And he was 15 to 17 fantasy points in the other games. So mid quarterback 2, I think, is where Matt Ryan is going to be pegged pretty much the rest of the way going forward. Is he going to have spike weeks? Occasionally, but to get almost 60 pass attempts, that's a little high for me. I think Matt Ryan goes back down to about the quarterback 15 to 18 range moving forward. The quarterback 3 on the week, Josh Allen. Josh Allen, 27 completions, 40 attempts, 67.5% completion. He threw for 329 yards, and he's leading the NFL in passing yards. So that continued this week against Kansas City. He was able to make the passes that he needed to get to Gabriel Davis and Stephon Diggs. And he also, per usual, rushed the ball, 12 attempts, 32 yards, did not score, but the 3 passing touchdowns got the job done through the air against a Kansas City defense, and their secondary is usually pretty tough. So the Isaiah McKenzie skyrocket did not work out. That was one of my bad calls for the week. I thought Isaiah McKenzie was going to be like a top 30 play, and he, in fact, was not a top 30 play. That's going to hurt my wide receiver rankings for week 6. But Josh Allen, this is where he's going to land. He's going to be a top 4 quarterback. He has the floor with the rushing, 32 yards, and he's willing to throw the ball down the field. He averages 8.2 yards per completion. So 8.2, or let's see, I think that's yards per completion. Yeah. Yards per attempt. Yeah, yards per attempt. 8.2 yards per attempt. Still one of the highest on the week. So I would say there's no reason to change your extremely high ceiling for Josh Allen. This was a set it, forget it type of game. The quarterback 4 for the week so far, Trevor Lawrence. So because Matt Ryan was pushing the game script, Trevor Lawrence was also being pushed in this game script. He did have 22 attempts, but Trevor Lawrence was very efficient. 20 completions, 22 attempts, 91% completion percentage, 165 yards, so did not have a lot of passing yards. 1 passing touchdown, 6 rushing attempts, 23 rushing yards, and he had 2 rushing scores. So when he was passing the ball, he was getting it to his guys. Now, the Indianapolis Colts have been generally pretty good about playing defense, but when Lawrence was choosing to pass the ball, he got it to his guys. Marvin Jones did miss this game. Jamal Agnew wasn't super involved. So, yeah, this is a ceiling game for Trevor Lawrence, but we can now say we've seen Trevor Lawrence get into this 20 plus fantasy point game. And the last time he did that, he's got 25 fantasy points week 3 against the LA Chargers. But looking back on 2021, in Trevor Lawrence's 17 games in 2021, he had a singular game where he scored 20 or more fantasy points. He has done so twice in 6 games so far. And he's going to get the New York Giants in week 7. I think he craters back down to earth. The Giants play very good pass defense against, in particular, the wide receivers. So this may be a Travis Etienne game. This might be a James Robinson game week 7 against the Giants. I think Trevor Lawrence is a quarterback 2. Somewhere, depending upon matchup, he falls in the higher or lower quarterback 2 range. This is an absolute ceiling game for Trevor Lawrence. 2 rushing scores. You can't bank on that. But there is a quarterback who does like to rush, and that is Marcus Mariota. 6 rushing attempts in this game against San Francisco. They ended up beating the 49ers pretty handily, 28-14. Mariota also didn't pass very much, but he completed 93% of his passes, 13 of 14 attempts, 9.2 yards per attempt, 129 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and a rushing score. That gets him to 24.2 fantasy points. Mariota he's shown up in some of these games. And anecdotally, I've picked up Mariota on a few of, or I had drafted Mariota on a few of my best ball teams and paired him with the likes of Dak Prescott and Trey Lance. And look, Mariota's filled in admirably in those absences as a late round quarterback. Mariota has had 2 games where he's had 13 to 15 fantasy points, 2 games where he's had 18 to 20 fantasy points. And now with this game, Mariota finishes as quarterback 5 with 24 fantasy points. He's a mid quarterback too, but you have to like the floor with the amount of rushing attempts that he has, with the yardage, 50 rush yards. And he's always willing to carry the ball close to the goal line, especially with Cordarrelle Patterson, who is on IR. So Mariota, week 5, 24 fantasy points. And as I mentioned earlier, the Atlanta Falcons get the Cincinnati Bengals in week 7. The quarterback 6 on the week, Patrick Mahomes. And Mahomes, he didn't have the best game, 25 of 40 attempts, 62.5% completion. It was fine. 338 passing yards. He had 2 picks in this game, but also 2 passing touchdowns. Scrambled around a little bit, had 21 rushing yards, 19.6 fantasy points. This is like a 50th percentile outcome for Patrick Mahomes, right? At quarterback 6, throws for over 300 yards, but throws 2 picks against the Buffalo Bills, and the Chiefs just come up a little short in this game. So, better days ahead for Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. This is an average game. So I'm not too worried about this. I know that a lot of Vegas sports books, they took a lot of bets on the over in this game, but it was 24-20, and both teams have respectable defenses, and that forced them to dink and dunk, really. Like, looking at who else had higher yards per attempt. I mean, Mariota had a higher yards per attempt. Bridgewater, Bailey Zappi had higher yards per attempt, just to name a few. So Patrick Mahomes, I think this is another day at the office. It was a tough defense. That's why he had the 2 picks. His rating was 85.2. That is the lowest of the quarterbacks in the top 6. So That's where we're going. And we did see Sky Moore involved a little bit. Marquez Valdes-Scantling goose egged. It's the Travis Kelce show, and Juju had an explosive game as well. So we'll see who else pops as the season goes on. Maybe it's Sky Moore, maybe it's MVS, but that's what we're working with in the Chiefs offense. Maybe it's a Clyde Edwards-Helaire game, but what's going to be consistent is Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce in this Chiefs offense. The quarterback 7 going into Sunday night is Justin Fields. And, this was the Thursday night game. Justin Fields, 12 rush attempts, 88 rushing yards, average 7 yards per rushing attempt. He only finished 14 of 27, but the 27 pass attempts is a season high for Justin Fields, 190 passing yards against Washington. They did lose 12-7, but they had plenty of opportunities near the goal line that were just squandered, frankly. The 190 passing yards in week 6 were just a little short of his season high 208 in week 5 against Minnesota. But his 88 rushing yards are the most this season and second most of his NFL career. He had 103 rushing yards against San Francisco last year. But this is encouraging to see a season high in fantasy points for Justin Fields, season high in rushing yards, season high in pass attempts. And I think as Fields gets more comfortable with this new offense, the coaching staff gets more comfortable with how he's seeing the field, because he did miss some plays and he second guesses himself on some of the reads. We'll see better days ahead for Justin Fields. He is dealing with a shoulder injury, so hopefully, that long weekend will give him time to shore himself up. He gets the New England Patriots on the 24th, so he's got plenty of time to get himself healthy. The rushing is what kept him in. Really didn't have a lot of, he only had 1 passing touchdown, so that is going to limit the ceiling. The pass volume is going to hurt. The passing yardage ceiling is going to hurt. And until they start passing the ball more and more down the field, we'll see. But it wasn't a Darnell Mooney game, but it was another Chicago Bear who, former San Francisco 49er, had a big game. We'll talk about him in a little bit. Okay, the quarterback 8 for this week was not one on the starting docket going into week 6, and that is Teddy Bridgewater. Now, Skylar Thompson started this game against the Minnesota Vikings, and Skylar Thompson was getting the ball to his receivers, but then he goes out with a thumb injury, and Teddy Bridgewater, who was just cleared of concussion protocol for this game, steps in. 34 pass attempts, 23 completions, 68% completion percentage. He threw for 329 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, was picked off twice, and had a 1 rush for 10 yards. 18.2 fantasy points for Teddy Bridgewater. And when you get the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, good things tend to happen. So Teddy Bridgewater, if he's not going to be the starter next week, week 7. The Miami Dolphins have already announced that it's going to be Tua Tagovailoa. But what should be very interesting for fantasy managers is buying low on Tua, right? We've seen ceiling games from Tua already, and now it doesn't matter to the quarterback, frankly, right? If Teddy Bridgewater can get a top 8 quarterback weekly finish, and Tua, looking at his other games, had the quarterback 2 overall finish week 2 against Baltimore, where he had 469 passing yards and 6 touchdowns. Like, we've seen it now in the range of outcomes for these Miami quarterbacks. So whoever is quarterback, if he can just get the ball to Waddle or get the ball to Tyreek Hill, and then sprinkle in some Mike Gesicki and sprinkle in some Chase Edmonds or Raheem Mostert, get some involvement as well. This is a very explosive offense, and the quarterback is going to ride the tails of the other offensive players. So I wouldn't say it's because Teddy Bridgewater is particularly talented. It's not that. It's that he's capable of getting the ball in the hands of his playmakers. The quarterback 9 on the week, Bailey Zappe. That's a surprise, at least a little bit. 24 of 34, 71% completion, threw for over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have 3 rushes for -4 yards, some kneel outs, that's how you end the game. 17.9 fantasy points. And the return of Tyquan Thornton, Kendrick Bourne was out. Hunter Henry found some space. Ramondre Stevenson got a full complement of snaps. So Zappe was tied to some dynamic players. And once again, he's riding the coattails of some of these very talented offensive weapons for New England. They were able to make it happen and play from ahead where, Bill Belichick was able to make good play calls against the Cleveland Browns, and Bailey Zappe has stepped in and played admirably. Now, I don't think there's quarterback controversy at all. I think Mac Jones, once he's healthy, steps in and is the quarterback. But this has to be reassuring for New England that they have, if Mac Jones misses any more time, they have a capable player in Bailey Zappe. This is a smash matchup against Cleveland, and they made the most of it, winning 38-15. Mac Jones was almost active for this game, so I would expect that he is back for their 7th game of the season. And the 10th quarterback, the last quarterback I'll talk about briefly today, Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo finishes as the quarterback 10, 29 of 41, 71% completion, 296 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 picks, 11 yards on the ground. And if we look at how Jimmy Garoppolo has done over the last few games, he's gone from the quarterback 14, 28, 22, 9, and now 10. So we've seen 2 top 10 performances from Jimmy Garoppolo over the last few weeks. And yes, it has been Carolina and Atlanta. But when you have Deebo Samuel, when you have Brandon Ayuk, when Jeff Wilson Jr. is, involved in this offense, then you've got some upside. And I think these are the ceilings for Jimmy Garoppolo, these 9 and 10 finishes. We're not going to get to a Jimmy Garoppolo finishes as a top 5 quarterback. But could we see a weekly outcome where Jimmy All right, I don't know why I got bumped off, but I was bumped off. We're back. Jimmy Garoppolo, I think this is a ceiling performance for him. Really, I don't think he can access the top 5 quarterback. You need rushing. And looking at what Jimmy Garoppolo has done over the last 4 games, a total of, what is that? 18 rushing yards in the last 5 games. So he's not adding anything with his legs. He's just passing the ball, and that's all San Francisco needs from him right now. We're going to move on to running back. And the running back 1 on the week, well, tied at running back 1, is Ramondre Stevenson. I already talked about Bailey Zappe, and the New England Patriots. But we knew that Ramondre this was within his range of outcomes. Last time he played Cleveland, he finished as the running back 2 in full PPR, finishes now as the running back 1 in half PPR in week 6 against Cleveland still. This was a 2-touchdown game. He averaged 4 yards per carry, which was fine. 76 rushing yards, 19 attempts. He played virtually 100% of running back snaps, 4 receptions, 15 receiving yards. And this was the top performance going into Sunday Night Football. That's what, Ramondre has shown us, is that he has a pretty significant ceiling. And as long as Damian Harris, who was ruled out for this game, as long as Damian Harris is out, we could see Ramondre just continue to rack up the fantasy points. He's coming off of 3 straight games where he's finished as a top 22 running back. Week 5, he finishes running back 14. Week 4 at 22. Week 3, running back 8. And even last season, right, when Ramondre Stevenson got carries, week 17 against Jacksonville, 19 carries, 15 routes run, 2 touchdowns, 107 total yards, finishes the running back 6. And then I mentioned the Cleveland game week 10 where he had 20 rushes, 6 red zone rushes. He's trusted around the goal line. This is a goal line back. He's built as such. He's 5'11", 231 pounds, big dude. And, you know, as long as Damien Harris is out, even Damien Harris is not out, Ramondre is a pretty solid running back too moving forward. But now we've seen the ceiling, running back 1 overall. Can't get any higher than that. The running back 1 on the week, also Deon Jackson. He tied Ramondre Stevenson, 21.3 fantasy points in half PPR scoring. But this was a different type of game. Like Deon Jackson and Ramondre Stevenson achieved their fantasy points in 2 different ways. Ramondre had 19 rush attempts, 76 yards, 2 rush touchdowns, and 4 receptions for 15 yards. Deon Jackson, on the other hand, was a safety valve for Matt Ryan, and that's probably why Matt Ryan was able to rack up larger yards down the field too, is because he was able to feel that rhythm and get in a groove for throwing the ball short, knowing where his outlet guy is, but also trusting Michael Pittman further down the field. And Deon Jackson, only 12 attempts, 42 rushing yards. He did have a rushing touchdown, but what separated Deon Jackson is the targets and the receptions. He leads all running backs in week 6 with 10 targets, leads all running backs with 10 receptions. And the next closest, 9 targets for Alvin Kamara, 7 receptions for Christian McCaffrey. And on the week, Deon Jackson, second among running backs with receiving yards of 79. So he just put it all together. This was a complete game. I put out 2 different videos about Deon Jackson, and I thought that Deon Jackson would be like a high-end running back 3, maybe a low-end running back 2. I ended up ranking him as such. And I don't think there are very many other fantasy analysts who ranked him, Fantasy Pros. I don't think many other fantasy analysts like ranked Deon Jackson much higher than I did. Like looking at the rankings, for half PPR, right? He was the consensus running back 29, which was about where I had him. And the highest that any ranker had him was running back 14. I had him at running back 28, so I was slightly above consensus on Deon Jackson, which is what I said. I said high-end running back 3, low-end running back 2, and that's where I landed is running back 28. He finishes as the running back 1 going into Sunday Night Football, and I don't think that there's a running back who's going to get up to 23 fantasy points just based on what I'm looking at here on the Sleeper app. I just don't see, in this Eagles-Dallas game. Yeah, Elliott's at 12, Sanders is at 12, Pollard's at 6. So we're not close for any other running backs to be within striking range. Looking at maybe it's going to be Austin Eckler. He's the only one really I think that has a chance in the Monday night game to get to the 23 or more fantasy points. But now we've seen, once again, a ceiling for Deon Jackson. We knew he was going to get the majority of carries and play the majority of snaps. We saw that in week 5. So week 6, this was hyper usage, though. Nyheim Hines plus Jonathan Taylor role, double-digit carries, double-digit targets. Deon Jackson finishing as the running back 1. As long as both of them are out, Deon Jackson, I think, has established himself as a back-end running back 1, I think is how we should treat him if he's the starter. And as a side note, I think this completely ruins Christian McCaffrey's trade value, right? If you can get a third string running back to score a touchdown and catch 10 passes in a game to keep your offense moving, like, why would you pay that much for Christian McCaffrey? Where would you? It wouldn't make sense to trade like a first or two firsts for Christian McCaffrey. Plus his contract. So just as an aside, I think Deion Jackson kind of ruined Christian McCaffrey's trade market here. We're looking at the running back 3. Speaking of McCaffrey, there he is. McCaffrey finishing with 13 rush attempts, 69 rush yards. He did not have a touchdown in this game, but 7 catches, 89 yards. He is the touch monster. He had 20 touches in this game, 158 total yards. And this is what you expect from Christian McCaffrey. He's going to be a top 5 running back week in, week out, whether he scores a touchdown or not. If he did end up scoring a touchdown, he would have been the running back 1 overall. He's doing the running back 3 with just the yardage and the targets and receptions. So fantasy managers should be happy with Christian McCaffrey pulling his weight here in week number 6. The most surprising running back in this top 10 is Kenyon Drake. He finished at the running back 4 on the week, or so far going into Sunday Night Football. 19.2 fantasy points, 10 carries, 119 rush yards, 1 touchdown, 8 receiving yards, 1 reception, 2 targets. And Kenyon Drake, he's increased his usage right over the last 2 games. Last game, 4 rush attempts, 26 yards. He had a reception and a target, 1 receiving yard, and then he just moves into a fuller role. I wonder if J.K. Dobbins just isn't ready and the coaching staff just isn't impressed with what they've been seeing. I mean, Kenyon Drake should be one of the highest priority waiver ads for you moving forward. I know that Justice Hill is working his way back from a hamstring injury. Gus Edwards is working his way back from the ACL tear earlier. But, I think that Kenyon Drake has to be a consideration with the amount of snaps that J.K. Dobbins has been playing the last few weeks. You have to be concerned about J.K. Dobbins. These are red flags. Now, will Kenyon Drake put up 116 yards? No, but if he's getting 10 carries in the game and let's say 50 rush yards, he has the chance to fall into the end zone and make himself a running back 2 on the week. So as long as he has a double-digit touch role, this is a running back 24 to 36 for me. I'm not overreacting and saying, oh, Kenyon Drake is going to be, because 11.9 yards per carry is not sustainable. It's not something that you can be like, wow, this is great. Also, Kenyon Drake's not involved in the passing game. He had 2 targets in this game, 1 reception for 8 yards. Like, that's not a ceiling type of performance. So he had extraordinary efficiency on the ground, and then he had the touchdown as well. So there we go. I think Kenyon Drake is a priority ad if you need like a 1 week or bye-week fill-in. He's not going to be the type of player that you are saying he's taken over the role. Kenyon Drake does not have a stranglehold of this Baltimore running back position spot. So, yeah, add him as a running back 3 consideration. At least we're a little bit more encouraged. I took a lot of Kenyon Drake late in some drafts in best ball, and hey, he's paying off. Too bad he's like a 0, for through weeks 1 through 5. But Kenyon Drake, running back 4 overall, going into Sunday Night Football. Austin asked, I have Breece Hall, James Robinson, James Conner. Do I package Conner and Robinson for a better running back? Yeah, if you can. James Robinson is going to be a 10 to 12 carry guy. He's going to be an early down, first and second down grinder. But it's Travis Etienne's role in the passing game. And we've seen Travis Etienne increase in snaps and increase in efficiency. So I think that it's Travis Etienne's backfield. It's his. It's not James Robinson's, even though James Robinson is not going to go away. And James Conner always struggles with his injuries. He's a back who gets banged up. He plays the running back position and he runs hard. And when you run hard, you take more vicious hits. And when you take more vicious hits, your body, can only handle so much. So if you can upgrade to get those others, let me see. I don't know what they would go for to upgrade, but if I could, I would try to get the likes of, I don't know if Kenneth Walker's too expensive. Um, you know, I'm wary of targeting like Darrell Henderson, because while Henderson is the running back 15 right now on the week, and I think he's a solid running back 2-ish, like it would not surprise me if the Rams are in the market to trade for a Christian McCaffrey type, and that would nerf Darrell Henderson. Like you wouldn't trade all of that capital and take on the contract of Christian McCaffrey to not use him. So that's what I would say. If you could get, maybe an achievable running back is Travis Etienne. He finishes the running back 18, at least going into Sunday Night Football. But as I mentioned, this is a backfield that is Etienne's. Etienne 10 carries, 86 yards. He had 2 targets, 2 receptions, 22 yards. He didn't have the touchdown, but when Etienne scores, it's going to be more of a like Alvin Kamara type of game than, a David Montgomery type of game. Okay. So if you can upgrade to Travis Etienne, or if you can just offer James Conner straight up, Austin, see if you can get Etienne. If not, sprinkle in James Robinson. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, we'll keep going. Appreciate the questions. If you have any others, throw them in the chat, and we'll see if we can get to them tonight. The next running back on the week, Breece Hall, running back 5. And I was very, very bullish on Breece Hall. He finished with 20 carries, 116 rush yards, 5.8 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. He only had 2 targets, caught both of them, though, for 5 yards. And Breece Hall just salted away the Green Bay Packers. Looked like dynamic run after dynamic run. This was what fantasy managers wanted from their running back in Breece Hall. He got a slow start. Let's not, put it too nicely. It was a slow start for Breece Hall. He had 6, 7, and 8 rush attempts each of the first 3 weeks. Now he's picked it up to 17, 18, and 20. Where's he going to go from here? Right? This was a massive, massive game. And in my top prop fantasy article, I compared Breece Hall to Aaron Jones. And I said, they've got the same dynamism. But if Aaron Jones doesn't get the usage, then the Packers aren't going to win. And in the losses for the Packers, Aaron Jones averages 9 carries per game going into week 6. How many carries did Aaron Jones get? That's right, 9 carries in this loss to the Jets. The Packers offense will follow where Aaron Jones's usage is. Whereas Breece Hall is exactly what you wanted Aaron Jones to be for this matchup. Breece Hall getting 20 carries and 2 targets, right? Over 100 total yards, 121 to be exact. Plus he got the touchdown. This was a big game for Breece Hall. He is easily a top 10 running back moving forward, if not even in that top 5 conversation, right? Okay, let's talk about it. Like Christian McCaffrey is up there. Jonathan Taylor should be up there. Maybe Leonard Fournette. Maybe Saquon Barkley. But I think the argument can be made that Breece Hall should be in this top 5 conversation pretty comfortably. So yes, you should be treating Breece Hall as a mid-pack running back 1 moving forward. Michael Valley asks, is Kenneth Walker the real deal. We'll talk about Kenneth Walker in just a couple minutes. So I appreciate your patience, Michael. We're going to talk about Kenneth Walker here. Devin Alcantara asks, just trade Diggs, Andrews, and ETN for CD, Kelce, and Josh Jacobs. Ooh, I'm not a fan of that trade. Sorry, Devin. I'd rather have the Diggs, Andrews, ETN side. I love Diggs upside. We saw, we'll talk about Diggs here later on in the stream. Andrews we'll talk about. And ETN, I already mentioned, is a trade target candidate for me. Or CD Lamb, like Cooper Rush, we've seen like nerf CD Lamb in some games. Even let's look at what's happening tonight, right? In the game right now, we are 2 minutes or so left in the fourth quarter. CD Lamb, 3 receptions, 8 targets, 37 total yards, or 37 receiving yards, 2 carries, 9 yards. Look, I'm sure that the Dallas Cowboys want to get Dak Prescott out there as soon as possible. But I am concerned, Devin, that CD Lamb is just not an improvement over Diggs. I think that Andrews and Kelce are back and forth. We'll talk about them later. And I think Josh Jacobs is, a better fantasy asset right now than Travis Etienne, like for right now. But by the end of the season, I think Etienne could be above him significantly. So I don't think that there's, the trade-off for Diggs to CD versus Jacobs to ETN. It makes up for that difference. I don't think that makes up for that difference. Okay. So sorry, Devin. I think you got the short end of the stick here. Hopefully you're not tilting too much. ML says, love your content. I appreciate you, ML. So thank you. I need to, you've written so much. Stick my head over here. Looking for best of these are running back sleepers in deep PPR. Only want to consider upside. Downside is irrelevant. Darrell Williams, Kenyon Drake, Chris Evans, Justice Hill, Isaiah Spiller. Okay. So good question. Only want upside. Obviously, we've seen the upside from Kenyon Drake now, right? Running back 4 finish this week. But if I were to pick one of the others for upside, Isaiah Spiller, 21-year-old running back, 4th round pick, and he had 1,000-yard rushing seasons each of his last couple of years. He was slow at the combine, but he catches the ball smoothly out of the backfield. He's not been playing a lot, so I wonder if he would just fill in a role later on in the season. I have a lot of Isaiah Spiller stashed away really deep. Yeah, and he fits the same type of play that Austin Eckler does. I'm not saying he's as talented as Austin Eckler. Let's not put that into the universe. But Isaiah Spiller is the type of running back that could catch 5 or 6 passes for 50 yards and then also have 12 carries for 48 yards and also fall into the end zone. So we're talking about 15-ish PPR fantasy points. So yes, I think that Isaiah Spiller is the longer term stash. Kenyon Drake, obviously, I think a much shorter stash. Okay. Devin says, I have Dak to stack with CD. Yeah, so maybe it's a longer term play. Fair enough, Devin. And that he needs a running back. And if you need one right away, I think Josh Jacobs right away. He's earned a 80+% role in that Raiders backfield, and he's going to be fresh coming off the bye. So you hope that he just continues to smash. ML says, thanks for the response. Agree that Spiller could be a late smash. So, yeah, I would rank, if you're looking short-term Kenyon Drake, longer-term Isaiah Spiller. Quinn Vade asks, Dalton Schultz is out this week. Do I drop Schultz, Curtin Samuel, or Brandon Cooks to make room for a tight end? And which tight end? Albert O, Salbert, or 3rd-round rookie coming off of IR, Greg Dulcich? Ooh, okay, so let's break this down. You probably should keep Schultz. Looking at the other tight ends that are, playing for Dallas right now, they're all splitting work. Ferguson does lead the tight end group with 6 targets, 40 yards. He did have a touchdown in this game, but Hendershot also had 4 targets. Okay. And Sean McKeon also had a catch for 10 yards. So they are splitting a lot. There is a rotation, but I think Schultz is the clear starter when he's healthy. I'm going to stick my head right here there, Quinn Vade. So hopefully you can, forgive me as I do this. And maybe, I don't know. There's no tilting of the head. It's just how StreamYard's working for me right now. But who are you going to drop? I would see if instead of dropping someone, this is where you try to play the games. This is a meta game. I'm not going to just try to drop somebody. I'm going to see first if I can trade somebody. If I can trade Brandon Cooks or Curtis Samuel, I would try to do that. Okay. Yeah, that's the first thing that I would do if I could trade Curtis Samuel or Brandon Cooks. And tomorrow, maybe what you do is you trade one of those players for Gerald Everett. I don't know if that's possible in your league. Just throwing it out there, putting it into the universe. Maybe it's a small possibility. Now, if you absolutely must drop someone, I think Schultz is droppable in this type of league. You have Curtis Samuel, who's leading the Washington Commanders in targets. So you don't want to drop like that player. But also Brandon Cooks, you don't want to drop either because they're both leading their teams in targets share with 22% or more. It's like you're dropping value and floor into the waivers. So there you go. I think that if you are forced to drop someone, Schultz is the one. If you can win without picking up a tight end, maybe you're already in that situation. Like, consider that. If you absolutely must pick up a tight end, I think a shot in the dark is Dulcich. He was winning this role, and the Denver beat reporters were already talking about how Dulcich was going to be a between the 20s guy for the Denver Broncos in the preseason before landing on IR. Like, as a rookie, the Denver beat reporters were saying this guy is going to play an immediate role. And I should have heeded that warning. I was a little prideful in my Albert Kuagbunam projection. And I don't think Saubert is a significant role player. He's a role player. He's not a significant asset. Greg Dulcich can be. So there we go. Okay. So, all right. He's like, I agree. Schultz is too valuable, but yeah, I tried trading for Everett because that's my only other option. Might have to just ride without a tight end. If you're going to win without a tight end, Quinn Vade, so be it. Gitz asks, if I tell you my team, can you tell me moves I need to make? I'm 1-5. Okay, so Gitz, I'll save you from needing to post all of your team. Looks like you typed it in already. But here's what I would do if I were you. I would pick one of the big time offenses. I think better days are ahead for the Bucs. Maybe you can buy low on the Bucs. I think that looking at trying to get the Minnesota Vikings on cheap, one of the things that worked for me in the past, and I'll tell the story. I included it in my fantasy data article this past week. I started 0-7 in a league. That's right, Gitz. I started 0-7. So I did not have a win through 7 weeks. And I did a hard pivot. I traded all of my players except Todd Gurley. And Todd Gurley was a starter back then. I traded all of my starters laterally to get the LA Rams offense. So I got Jared Goff, I got Cooper Kupp, I got Robert Woods, and I had Todd Gurley, and then I also picked off Tyler Higbee off of waivers. And that's called super stacking because you're already at a loss. You already know that the players you have, something's just not working, right? Let's look at who you have, like Dak, Saquon, Walker, Kupp, Diggs, Godwin, Schultz, London. The bench is Myers, Zach Wilson, Dotson, McKissick, Hollins, White, Conklin. right? Better days are ahead, but you've already got some upside. You got Kupp and Diggs. Saquon is an elite player. Maybe you do ride a little bit with this team. See if you can get, Dak for Tom Brady. I don't know if that's going to be like lining up, but you want to find a stack that works for you. I don't know what it would take for you to get Josh Allen, but to upgrade Dak to Josh Allen, I'm not sure if you could get like Drake London plus Dak could get you Josh Allen. It's just really hard because Josh is so much higher. I'm not sure that can get there. That's what I'm worried about, is that, I wonder if you have the assets to be able to get there. So that's what I would consider, though, is moving to try to stack and upgrade to a stack. So combine a few players, intentionally target, if you want to go the CD Lamb route, you think better days are ahead, trading Godwin for Lamb. Okay, if there's, I think that's pretty lateral. I think arguments can be made both ways for Godwin and Lamb, and depending on who has Lamb, that could work. So, yeah, I would move towards seeing if you can do a super stack here. Kupp, Saquon, and Godwin. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, sometimes people just love their Josh Allen, and I don't. I mean, I would ask for the moon. But maybe you can come back to him and say, well, definitely Godwin can be included in that package. Dak would need to be included in that package. And then, I don't think you can give up, startable. So Godwin, Dak, and Drake London. See if that's enough to get Josh Allen. That's maybe a counter that I would make. I'm not sure if you'll get there still. I'm not sure, but that's probably maybe sprinkling a tad more, but it's not like you can't add another needle moving piece. That's what I would recommend. That's the farthest I would go. Okay. So I'd consider super stacking if possible. I don't think the running backs for Dallas are ones to be targeting right now. I think Zeke has a really limited ceiling. So Saquon, Kenneth Walker, I think you'll be fine moving forward with those. Okay. Good luck. I wish you luck, Gitz, because, I've been in that situation before. So I started 0-7, right? So, okay, finish the story. Finish 0-7 or start 0-7. I make that big pivot. I win the rest of my games, the rest of the season. I win out. It's like a 14, 15 week season. I think it's 14 weeks in the league I was playing in at that time. So I finished 7-7, made the playoffs, and then made a run in the playoffs, right? That's all you need. So you're not out of it. I think you just have to consider what are some of the higher octane offenses that maybe have untapped potential right now. I think Tom Brady is pretty cheap to get right now to stack with Godwin. Maybe if you can get Evans plus another running back 2 for Diggs. I don't know if that's going to be too much, but I think that's how I would lean in those situations, because what do you have to lose? You're already 1-5, right? Might as well have some fun with it and root for a particular team that has a good offense. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Best of luck with it. I'm sure trade negotiations are going to be pretty interesting in that 12-man 3/4 PPR league. Last question before we move on in the running backs is Antonio Gibson for Tony Pollard. Yeah, I'd get Tony Pollard if I'm trading away Antonio Gibson in a redraft. I'd still keep Antonio Gibson in Dynasty. Like, I'm not trading him away. Tony Pollard could be a complete zero next year, or he could be setting the world on fire. But yeah, Tony Pollard has a bigger role and plays more snaps. I mean, look at what Tony Pollard did just this past Sunday, right? Pollard 11 carries, 44 yards. He had 2 receptions for 8 yards, so 52 total yards. He had 13 touches. That's not something Antonio Gibson's going to get unless Brian Robinson gets hurt moving forward. Okay, Gitz, I'll entertain one more. Is Geno a good quarterback to go for? I mean, Geno's been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL so far. Looking at what he did, he is quarterback 17 right now. He didn't throw any touchdowns, but still 20 of 31 is respectable. 197 passing yards, not crazy, but they did beat the Arizona Cardinals. And that's all that matters to Pete Carroll. So if that's what it takes, 19-9, so be it. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going. Leonard Fournette also finished as the running back 5 this week. He's not going away anytime soon, and the buy low window for Leonard Fournette is all but gone. Fournette's been crushing it as of late. Looking at in half PPR over the last couple weeks, he's had 15 fantasy points, 30 fantasy points, and now a running back 5 finish with 19 fantasy points. Look, this is still a really good running back on a team that likes to get the running back the ball in space. And it doesn't matter that Rachaad White is getting some usage, which he is. Like, Rachaad White is not going away. He's going to continue to be involved. Like, Rachaad White finishes running back 38. He only had 3.8 fantasy points, but he had 4 targets and 4 rush attempts, 23 total yards. So yeah, I think if you're stashing running backs as well and Rachaad White is on your waiver wire, yeah, you want to pick up Rachaad White because you know what the role Leonard Fournette has in this offense. And Rachaad White would just step right on in. Capable pass catcher, 3rd round pick, and much better than the previous 3rd round pick, Keyshawn Vaughn, from a couple years back. So no, this is not Keyshawn Vaughn 2.0. This is a legit handcuff to Leonard Fournette. But as long as Fournette is in the lineup, he is a bona fide solid running back 1. Moving on to the running back 7, Kenneth Walker, right? One of the listeners and viewers asked about Kenneth Walker. Michael Valley asked, is Kenneth Walker the real deal? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. This is a dude who's super dynamic at Michigan State, worthy of his draft capital. 2nd round pick, 22 years old. And looking at his metrics coming into week 6, where he finishes the running back 7, his efficiency metrics and you would not expect this from a player who going into week 6 had no more than 8 carries in any game in the first 4 games. But he is a dog, okay? 12th among running backs coming into this game. 12th among running backs in true yards per carry. 14th in yards per touch. 10th in juke rate. Is he juking at the line of scrimmage? Is he trying to make guys miss him? 10th in breakaway run rate. 9th in premium production. 2nd in yards created per touch. And he's facing, when he was in the lineup, his average defenders in the box, 7.1, that ranked 4th, and he was still pulling off these efficiency metrics. Stacked front carry rate, 26.1%. So 26% of the time, he was running with a stacked front and still putting up the numbers that he was, or the efficiency metrics that he was. So Kenneth Walker, running back 7 on the week, 21 carries, 97 rushing yards, 4.6 per tote, a touchdown, 3 targets, 2 receptions, 13 yards. And that's going to be fine for Kenneth Walker, right? It's not like Rashad Penny was getting 8 targets, 10 targets. So we know that the Seattle running backs are going to get between 2 and 4 targets a game. We know they're going to get between like 10 and 25 receiving yards. But now that Kenneth Walker has this full role, yeah, he's a mid-pack running back 2 is his floor. Like, we're talking running back 15 or higher pretty much every week moving forward, with the touchdown possibility. He's going to get 20 carries a game as long as he stays healthy. This is a pretty decent offense. and they were running well against the Cardinals. So Kenneth Walker, running back 7. There we go. Question from Ethan Hartman. I'm not sure who to start for my wide receiver position. I have Evans, Cooper, Gabe Davis, Deontay Johnson, who should be my wide receiver 1 and 2. This is pretty straightforward, I think, Ethan. Mike Evans is your wide receiver 1, and Gabe Davis is your wide receiver 2. Look, we want to talk ourselves out of Gabe Davis. He's not getting the target share, right? Yeah, a lot of fluke plays. Josh Allen is looking to make fluke plays happen with Gabe Davis. That's the thing. Is he going to have an occasional bust game? Sure. But the ceiling is so much higher for Gabe Davis than it is for Amari Cooper. Has Jacoby Brissett throwing him the ball? Yeah. And Deontay Johnson now has Mitchell Trubisky back throwing him the ball after Kenny Pickett left with a concussion. I think Mike Evans and Gabe Davis. Evans is the perfect wide receiver 1. He's going to be, putting up the numbers that you're comfortable with at the wide receiver 1 position on a pretty regular basis. And then he's more consistent. And then Gabe Davis has wide receiver 1 upside, which is what you want from your wide receiver 2. But the other wide receivers have more significant issues. Yeah. We're talking about Gabe Davis makes me feel uncomfortable because we all know that like touchdowns are fluky and touchdowns aren't sticky and long plays are not sustainable long term. That's what we've generally seen. But if you have a quarterback who is regularly looking to throw the ball down to his receiver, and Gabe Davis is a big-bodied receiver. He was a deep threat when he was in college. I think it was Florida International. 4th round pick. Dude was a downfield threat there, and he's stepped up, and I think he fits well into that wide receiver 2 spot. Okay. All right, last question before we continue with the position studs and duds, or the studs. I was going to do a duds, but I didn't want to be down on anybody. I wanted to build up our players. I'm down 15.6 going into tomorrow. Opponent's done. Sutton, Everett, PPR. How confident should I be in getting the W? Pretty confident. Sutton will give you 12 points in PPR pretty safely. I think 6 catches for 60 yards. And then you're banking on Everett getting 1 or 2 catches for 20 yards. I think you're in good shape. Sutton is the clear wide receiver 1 in the Denver offense. He's commanding target shares. He's quietly putting up, back end wide receiver 1 season, despite the struggles that we've seen from this Denver offense. So also Everett, I know he had a bust game last week. He'll get his 12 to 15% target share in the Chargers offense. I'm not too worried. I also think that with the type of defense that Patrick Surtain is going to play on Mike Williams down the field, that Everett may be also a safety valve for Justin Herbert going into Monday Night Football. So just thinking about the game plan that might happen, Sutton is going to get the targets. Everett is going to get his. I would put it at 75 to 80% confidence that Sutton and Everett get that 15.6 for you. I'd probably say, pretty 75 to 80% confidence. Hopefully that helps, Jacob. All right, we're going to talk about Saquon Barkley now. Running back 8 on the week, 22 carries, 83 yards. He had his touchdown, 3 receptions on 3 targets, 12 receiving yards. Not the best day at the office for Saquon Barkley, but got the job done. 17 points with that touchdown. Fine. Saquon Barkley somehow is going to fall in that top 12 range, whether it's the running back 3 or the running back 12 or running back 8 in this case, or the running back 4. He's going to get the volume as we saw. He had 25 touches in this game, 95 total yards. However it works for Saquon Barkley, it's going to work. And with the wide receiver issues, like the Giants are comfortable giving heavy dosages of Saquon Barkley. The Giants are playing pretty well. Okay. 5-1. Let's not sell them short at all. Running back 8 because Kenny Galladay's doing nothing. Kadarius Toney is reportedly on the trade block. Wan'Dale Robinson just came back from injury and put up a respectable game. So I think that it's possible that Wan'Dale leads the team by the end of the season in targets, but Saquon Barkley is going to be just heavily, heavily featured because that's how the Giants have won games. They beat the Baltimore Ravens. They've beat the Green Bay Packers. The Giants are for real despite their wide receiver issues. So Saquon Barkley, safe running back 1 moving forward. All right, Alvin Kamara, last 2 games has finished as a top 10 running back, despite the issues at quarterback. We see Andy Dalton, getting the start, and the New Orleans losing to the Cincinnati Bengals this week. But Alvin Kamara has now handled 19 and 23 carries each of the last 2 weeks. He's on pace to break last season's record of 240 rush attempts, right? He is well on his way, and it's the receiving that is concerning for me for Alvin Kamara. Only 25 receiving yards on 6 receptions. He did have 9 targets, so it's good that Andy Dalton is looking his way, but he's not getting room to run, and that's bad when Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, and Jarvis Landry are all out for this New Orleans offense. They just couldn't seem to get the ball moving in the way that they want to and be successful here to pull out the W, right? Taysom Hill was pretty limited. Hill only completed 2 passes for 15 yards and also rushed for 40 yards. Kamara is a low-end running back 1 moving forward. I don't know what else to say. As long as some of the wide receivers are out, he's going to get the high target share, 9 targets in this game against Cincinnati. But he didn't fall in the end zone. If he would have fallen in the end zone, he'd be the running back 3 on the week behind only Jackson and Stevenson. So, we'll see what the future holds for this New Orleans offense when they're going to get all of their weapons back. But as long as they do, Kamara is a pretty solid back-end running back 1. And the running back 10 on the week going into Sunday Night Football, Dalvin Cook. Now, I just got a stats update. Ezekiel Elliott. Oh, there was a spider. Ezekiel Elliott is currently the running back 10, 13 carries, 81 yards, and a touchdown. He also had a catch for 5 yards, 15.1 fantasy points. Dalvin Cook with 14.8. 13 carries for Dalvin Cook, 77 yards. He had 1 big rush and 1 target, 1 reception, and a touchdown. Dalvin Cook, back end running back 1. Things just couldn't get going for the Minnesota Vikings. They're 5-1 as well, leading the division. The Packers are struggling. The Bears are bad. The Lions have a bad defense. They've got an interesting offense. But as I made this prediction in the offseason, Minnesota has one of the best chances to lead this division, and they have taken a pretty strong hold to start this year. And it's Justin Jefferson, it's Adam Thielen. Now, Irv Smith got involved this week. Dalvin Cook. This is a more balanced offense now. I don't know how often we're going to see Dalvin Cook getting 23 to 25 carries anymore, but I think that getting 13 to 18 carries is what we can expect from him. Alexander Mattison wasn't really involved in this game. It was a lot of passing for Kirk Cousins. So, better days ahead for Dalvin Cook. I think he'll get a few more carries. He had 1 big rush, but he probably still is dealing with that shoulder issue that bugged him at the beginning of the season and has bugged him in previous seasons as well. So lower your ceilings for Dalvin Cook. If you expected him to be a top 5 running back on the season, I don't know if he's going to get there for you. All right, we're going to move on to the wide receiver position. And this week, I put in my top prop fantasy article. Let me see if I can pull that up. In my top prop fantasy article, I had to make a choice. Between Ja'Marr Chase and Stephon Diggs. And I'll actually put that in the comments here, my article. You can see what I said. So I'll talk about these first two, the wide receiver 1 and the wide receiver 2. Okay. Ja'Marr Chase, wide receiver 1 on the week. He had, let me see here, 28.7 half PPR fantasy points, 7 catches on 10 targets, 132 yards receiving, 2 scores, 18.9 yards per reception, 13.2 yards per target. As I said, 28.7 fantasy points. And I wrote in my article that these were 2 top-tier wide receivers, both consensus first-round picks, Ja'Marr Chase and then Stephon Diggs, who we'll talk about next. And I've said Stephon Diggs is already delivered. We've seen 3 top 7 weeks. Add this a 4th top 7 week for Stephon Diggs. And Ja'Marr Chase, he's been a little bit frustrating, for fantasy managers because he finished 4th among wide receivers in fantasy points week 1, but he's finished outside the top 25 every week going into week 6. Now he finishes as the running back 1. T. Higgins did get 10 targets in this game against New Orleans, but didn't do much with it. I think he only had like 48 receiving yards and six receptions. But it's Ja'Marr Chase who's stepped up here. Ja'Marr Chase's target share was higher than Diggs coming into this game. They had the same amount of red zone targets. Ja'Marr Chase had a higher air yard share and a higher true catch rate. But Stephon Diggs had the higher expected fantasy points per game by 0.6 or 0.6 of a fantasy point, and he had a higher yards per route run. I thought that Ja'Marr Chase had felt the wrong side of variance so far, and that his week 6 matchup with New Orleans was going to be very plus because Marshawn Lattimore wasn't going to play for the Saints. So I said Ja'Marr Chase plus 2.5 points in this article over Stephon Diggs, and that seemed to be the right call. Ja'Marr Chase plus 2.5 was a win. So T. Higgins was questionable. No Matt Lattimore. I took the juice between these two, and I didn't need the juice of 2.5 fantasy points, but there you go. The wide receiver 2 on the week, Stephon Diggs, he had a massive, massive game as well. And it's funny that I profiled these 2 wide receivers in the top prop fantasy article that I wrote on Friday night. But Diggs finished with 10 receptions. So more receptions, more targets, more receiving yards, 148, but only 1 receiving touchdown. And that is the difference of 1.9 fantasy point differential between Ja'Marr Chase, who finishes the wide receiver 1, Stephon Diggs as the wide receiver 2 on the week. Diggs, this is his 4th top 7 wide receiver weekly finish, and he was my favorite regression candidate, and not regression as in negative, but you're not going to say positive or negative regression. I had talked about in the offseason that if you saw a 10% dip in elite wide receiver 1 weeks, if you saw a 10% or more dip, that dip on average was 15%. And the next season, those players bounced back and added about 9% more wide receiver 1 week. So 1 or 2 more weeks than the previous season. Stephon Diggs had all of the underlying metrics. He's very well in this conversation as the wide receiver 1 overall. And it would not surprise me if by year's end, he finishes as the wide receiver 1 significantly over whoever's going to be number 2. Third on the week, Brandon Aiyuk. And Aiyuk left this game early He was, I think he was taken off on a stretcher. Maybe I'm mistaken on that. But during his time playing against Atlanta, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 72.7 catch percentage, 83 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Yes, his longest reception was only 14 yards, and that was on the touchdown. But Brandon Aiyuk, former first round pick, and I already talked about how Jimmy Garoppolo, like, he had been working in the preseason, or he had not had it all in the preseason working with the team. He worked away from the team during the preseason. So for the first couple games, like, Jimmy Garoppolo is just getting his feet wet. Like, he's playing his preseason in a sense. And Brandon Aiyuk had not had a wide receiver finish higher than wide receiver 39 coming into this game. And now Aiyuk finally goes off. I have a lot of Brandon Aiyuk in best ball. So we'll see if my teams are looking better now that Aiyuk has this 24.3 fantasy point output. We'll see how he's doing. We'll see how he's recovered from injury. But you like to see this type of upside from Brandon Aiyuk. For what it's worth, Deebo Samuel is the wide receiver 21 right now, still had 12.5 fantasy points, 10 targets, 7 receptions, 79 yards, also 2 carries for 11 yards for Deebo Samuel. The wide receiver 4 on the week, Tyreek Hill. Okay, Tyreek Hill, 15 targets, 12 receptions, 177 receiving yards, no touchdowns though. But his longest was 28 yards. It's not like he broke off these long touchdowns that we see from Tyreek Hill from time to time. No, Teddy Bridgewater was comfortable just thinking and dunking. Yards per target, 11.8. Okay. Looking at where he ranks, 11.8 ranks wide receiver 19 so far on this week. Yards per target, 11.9. But Tyreek Hill getting all of the yards. When you get 15 targets and 12 receptions and 177 yards, you're going to put up fantasy points. And Tyreek Hill has been quarterback proof, as I've mentioned, like whether it is Tua Tagovailoa, whether it's Skylar Thompson or Teddy Bridgewater, Tyreek Hill will produce as long as he's on the field and as long as he's healthy. He's a set it and forget it solid wide receiver 1. This should not be a surprise. Now, there were some surprises in this list, but the highest surprise was Chase Claypool tying for wide receiver 5 so far on the week. Claypool caught all of his targets, 7 targets, 96 receiving yards. He had a touchdown, and he also had a rushing attempt for 8 yards. Chase Claypool, this was a Chase Claypool game. It was not a Deontay Johnson game. Deontay Johnson right now, wide receiver 45, and Pickens isn't even in the top 50. So, Chase Claypool will have these occasional spike weeks. We saw a couple years ago, Chase Claypool have double-digit touchdowns, former second-round pick out of Notre Dame. If we look back during his rookie year, right, Chase Claypool did finish as the wide receiver 1 overall week 5 in 2020. He also had, a wide receiver 15 finish that year, wide receiver 12 finish, wide receiver 13 finish, wide receiver 16 finish, weekly finishes that year. But looking at what he did last season, there were no top 10 performances for Chase Claypool last season. The best he could do was top 12 week 5 against Denver, where he scored a touchdown. He had 6 targets, 5 receptions, 130 yards. So, I think we're finally going to see a couple more ceiling games for Chase Claypool. It's nice to see that he caught all of his targets. He's been pretty inconsistent in his career catching passes from the quarterbacks. So this was an encouraging game for Chase Claypool, catching all 7 of his targets. Not super heavily targeted, but it's nice to see. And on the complete flip side, a player who got to 19.9 fantasy points, but in a different way, is Michael Pittman, also wide receiver 5, but he had 9 more targets, 6 more receptions, and he had 38 more receiving yards than Chase Claypool, still finished with the same fantasy points. So there's the give and take of efficiency versus volume, right? This is Michael Pittman, 16 targets, but no touchdown. And Matt Ryan was just going to hyper target Michael Pittman in this game. Like Michael Pittman, we were wondering if he was going to return to the wide receiver 1 level that we saw in week 1 when Indianapolis played Houston, right? In half PPR, Michael Pittman finished with 22.6 fantasy points that week. He had 13 targets, 9 receptions for 121 yards and a touchdown. Now 19.9 fantasy points on 15 targets. So there we go. 16 targets. So yeah, I think that this is Michael Pittman. Floor games are like wide receiver 4, but now we've seen that he can hit those top 10, top 5 wide receiver weeks. So Michael Pittman, a boom bust wide receiver 2 moving forward. Ethan's asking, my team's 3-3 with Kyler, Henry, Mixon, Big Mike, Gabe, Dallas Goedert, Jamal Williams, Younghoe Koo, and the Bills D. What should I do? Oh, man. I feel like Kyler's underperforming. Henry's playing pretty well. Mixon, I mean, let's look how Joe Mixon did this week. Let's go to running backs here. Control F. Mixon. Mixon finishes the running back tied for the running back 10 with Dalvin Cook. Only 8 carries, but he had 5 targets, 4 receptions, a receiving touchdown, 23 yards. So he got the job done for you. Mike Williams, if you can sell high on Mike Williams, I think there's a lot of optimism about Big Mike. But Keenan Allen should be back. He was ruled doubtful, was close to playing. He got in some limited practices this week. So Big Mike is a sell high for me right now because I think Keenan Allen comes back and plays better, and Mike Williams he's going to be relegated to more like wide receiver, high end wide receiver 2 instead of wide receiver 1 status. So if you can get a player like a Michael Pittman for Big Mike, or if you can get an A.J. Brown, okay, I don't know if that's within the range of outcomes. Jalen Waddle could get the job done. Jalen Waddle didn't make the top 10, but he had 6 receptions, 60 yards, 129 receiving yards, just didn't get the touchdown. So I wonder if you can pivot to a Jalen Waddle or a Michael Pittman who have a better or more consistent target share in their offense and aren't depending upon the absence of another wide receiver. Okay. That's what I would consider. You're doing okay. Like 3-3 is not panic time. It's not panic time. Okay. Let's keep it moving. So we talked about Michael Pittman, wide receiver 5, Juju Smith-Schuster. There we go. This is ultra efficiency once again. 113 receiving yards, a touchdown, only 5 targets, and that has to be mighty, mighty concerning. If you can sell high on Juju Smith-Schuster, I think that's even more of a sell high than Mike Williams at this point. If you can somehow convince somebody to take Juju, you can sell him as he's tied to one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's got a high target share in this Chiefs offense. Didn't you just see he had an explosion game? The problem is looking at what Juju has done this year, aside from this game, no higher than 11.4 half PPR fantasy points. He had one game, week 3 against Indy, where he had 5 catches, 8 targets, 89 receiving yards. In fact, looking at his history, Juju hadn't caught a touchdown since week 17 of 2020. Okay. Low ADOTs on a bad offense leading up to 2022. really got in Juju's way, and him playing the slot for the Chiefs offense, like there's balls to go around, and Travis Kelce is the number one option near the goal line. Like Mahomes looks for Kelce. We saw that in the 4-touchdown game for Kelce just last week, in week 5. So Juju Smith-Schuster, I think he's a sell high candidate if you can. He had no more than 89 receiving yards as his highest, 79, and then 46, 33, and 10 coming into this game. Yes, I'm selling on Juju. I want him off my teams. I don't want to have to think about him. If you can get, once again, another trade target, if you can get a Michael Pittman, if you can get a Jalen Waddle, if you can get, I don't know if Chris Godwin is gettable, but you just put out these offers of players that and it's within the range of outcomes that somebody might bite. And maybe they're like, oh, Juju, this is a fluke. And then you learn things about your league mates of how much are they paying attention to this. But you can sell it on Juju had a heck of a game. He had over 100 receiving yards, had his touchdown, and we've seen the boom week. So there you go. Sell Juju Smith-Schuster. We do have a rookie make this top 10 of wide receivers, and it's not a rookie that you would have thought. Tyquan Thornton was involved in every aspect of the game. He had 7 touches in this game, 37 receiving yards, 16 rushing yards on 3 attempts. He had 2 total touchdowns. I don't think that Tyquan Thornton, is a wide receiver 2 even, but what we're like moving forward, but he could be a waiver consideration. And if he's going to get, 5 targets just in his first game back, and they want him to touch the ball on the ground, and he's super duper speedy, like if he was a 2nd round pick, Tyquan Thornton, 100th percentile 40-yard dash, 4.28, 93rd percentile speed score, 90th percentile burst score, 85th percentile catch radius, 6'2", 183. His player profiler comp is Robbie Anderson. Okay. Once again, a tall, lanky, speed receiver. He's out of Baylor. And Tyquan Thornton, last time he played week 5, Jeff Okudah, only 40% of snaps. He had 3 targets, ran 10 routes. And so we saw more targets this week. We saw an increase in production, manufactured touches for Tyquan Thornton. So I think he's a waiver consideration in your leagues. Jacoby Myers still played in this game, even though he was questionable coming into it. Jacoby Myers finishing as the wide receiver 37 in this game. And you also have to think the New England Patriots were in control of this game for a good portion of the second half. So riding Ramondre Stevenson makes sense, but if they're in more competitive game scripts moving forward, Tyquan Thornton could be leaned upon more heavily than he has been in his first 2 games back from IR. Lincoln was here, asked, if I tried to flip Daniel Bellinger in Dynasty, half tight end premium, what could I get? Here's my 4th string tight end. He's my 4th string behind Kelce, Andrews, and Waller. So I don't think Daniel Bellinger is going to be like a thing. Like he had a good week this week, but looking at like who can I try to get? Well, here's some suggestions. I like using Keep Trade Cut. At least if you've never used KeepTradeCut.com, you should consider it. Bellinger, just because it gives you like at least a baseline of what's the market reasonably looking for this player. And then I look at like team needs and but I don't send out like blind offers based on this, but it is interesting just to at least see like Keep Trade Cut in a super flex has Daniel Bellinger as like a 2023 mid 3rd round pick, or if you get Corey Davis, Tyrion Davis Price, Marcus Mariota in a super flex, like those are the types of players that Keep Trade Cut is recommending based on the market submissions that they receive. So I don't know if tight end premium, really moves the needle for me, honestly. Here's a 2-second philosophy on tight end premium. If it's not one of the elite tight ends like Andrews and Kelsey, even Waller and Kittle, tight end premium means nothing to me in these leagues. So there we go. Okay. There's a lot of young team in my league. I already traded Kmet for Bateman. I think trading Kmet for Bateman was beautiful. If you already have Kelsey and Andrews and Waller, then yes, you should be doing trades like that. So if you can even upgrade a little bit, let me see if I can. Yeah, there's not really much movement for Daniel Bellinger. Maybe Nyheim Hines or Zay Jones, or even Chase Edmonds is maybe a stretch here. Depends on what you need. So those are just some ideas from Keep Trade Cut for Daniel Bellinger. Chef LN Nabby, thanks for tuning in. Offer Ramondre Stevenson and Christian Kirk for Kamara. Offer Ramondre Stevenson and Christian Kirk for Kamara. No. See if you can get Kamara for less. Stevenson just has been outscoring Kamara. I think you're buying the brand of Alvin Kamara, and you're buying Michael Thomas is not there, Chris Olave is not there, Jarvis Landry is not there, Jameis Winston's not there. So I would not be doing that. I would hold on to Stevenson and Christian Kirk for right now. If you can get Kamara for cheaper, maybe, but I would not do that. Lincoln was here, said he had a 23-point game in my league the week before he got 15. We'll talk about Bellinger because he does show up on this list as the tight end 6 right now so far this week. But there we go. Okay, some 9 teams might be interested. I agree. By the way, what did you see from Moore and Alec Pierce? Which Moore? Because we've got a few Moores. I'm assuming Sky Moore just because of the rookie. But Alec Pierce, I think he's a top 36 wide receiver moving forward. He didn't get the volume that he had gotten in previous weeks, but Michael Pittman got a lot of the volume. I think it'll balance out a little bit more in week 7. But Alec Pierce is a significant part of this offense. So, yeah, I'm pleased with that. Sky Moore, on the other hand, isn't making the top 50 right now. So, as long as if he's not playing the snaps, then he's not going to be on the field. And if he's not on the field, he's not going to be able to get targets or fantasy points. I think you're just going to have to play the waiting game with Sky Moore. He's droppable right now, unless you have a really, really large bench. Alec Pierce is going to be a flex consideration each week. Okay. Once Harris gets back, I believe he'll take a step back. I mean, yeah, he'll take a step back. Even with Harris, Ramondre Stevenson was a pretty consistent running back too during that time. So I don't know. I think the Kamara's a running back too with those other weapons. So I wouldn't trade Christian Kirk to make sure I get Alvin Kamara. I wouldn't do that. But if that's something you want to do and you want Kamara on your team, you go for it. I'm not saying don't do I'm not saying it's a stupid thing to do. I wouldn't do it because I think that you're giving too much value away in my perception. Maybe you can do Christian Kirk or Ramondre Stevenson for Alvin Kamara and maybe a wide receiver, a little bit lower wide receiver that you like too. So just consider that. Be willing to negotiate too. Yeah. So just think about it that way. Rondell Moore. We'll keep moving with Rondell Moore in the wide receiver vein. He finishes the wide receiver 38 right now in half PPR. 10 targets, 6 receptions, 49 receiving yards. And this is going to be such a typical Rondell Moore stat line. He's going to get lots of targets, close to the line of scrimmage. His yards per target, 4.9 yards per target. He's 5'7", 170 something pounds. He's the Ant-Man incarnate, right? And just so happened he got 10 targets. So he's going to get a lot of targets close to the line of scrimmage. Is he going to be fast enough to break away from NFL receivers, NFL defensive players? I think that remains to be seen. But Rondale Moore is a player that he's going to be a low upside flex play in PPR. He's a flex play, but low upside if you really need somebody to get 6 receptions for 50 yards. Okay, Rondale Moore, I guess, is your guy. Lincoln's continuing to dig at this Bellinger. Is he a sell high dump off to a young team before D-Hop comes back, or will he still get action? Oh, this is with regard to Rondale Moore. So here's a wrinkle to this question, Lincoln. Marquise Brown is dealing with an ankle injury, and it could be minor, but it could be serious too. He got rolled up on. X-rays were negative. There's going to be more testing done tomorrow, but I think Rondale Moore, I'd rather, like, if you're going to pivot to upside, like, give me an opportunity where the wide receiver could be the wide receiver 1 on his team. And that's, if you're going to pivot to like Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, Wan'Dale might lead his team in wide receiver targets. All right. This was also a second round wide receiver. Wan'Dale Robinson, though, 3 receptions, 75 yards, 37 receiving yards, 9.2 yards per target, like double the amount that Rondale Moore was. Wan'Dale Robinson was just a dynamic player. I think it was Kentucky. So that's what I would do. See if you can get him, if you're going to pivot to a player that I think has more upside, but that same type of target. Okay. Ooh, Kenson Paris jumping in. Appreciate you asking these questions. Should I trade Jonathan Taylor and Debo for Jamar Chase and Hurts? I already have Henry, Josh Jacobs, Ken Walker. Only have Debo and CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver, Derek and Dak at quarterback. Any advice? Kenson also adds Debo's not consistent and is hardly target mid to deep threat, not really truly a wide receiver. Not sure if I should stay put or try to upgrade my quarterback and wide receiver for more consistent players. Okay. So let's get back to the original and we'll shimmy it out from there. Trade Jonathan Taylor. So you're upgrading slightly from Debo to Chase. At least that's how you should perceive it from a fantasy perspective. It is an upgrade, but I think it's a slight upgrade. And you already have Dak, and you're giving away Jonathan Taylor so you can upgrade from Dak to Jalen Hurts. I wouldn't do that. I would not trade Jonathan Taylor to upgrade from Dak to Jalen Hurts. Dak has... So if we look at over the last few seasons, Dak Prescott has been... he and Patrick Mahomes are the only 2 quarterbacks who have a 75th percentile outcome of 25 fantasy points or more. I think that's the number. But he and Patrick Mahomes are the only ones who are achieving that ceiling pretty consistently, like 25% of the time. Those are the 2 who are meeting that 25-point threshold. And you don't, like, if you're starting CD, then you're going to start the stack with him, right? You're going to start Dak. So I would be open to upgrading from Debo to Chase. Like, that's something I would want to do. But I would, if I'm getting rid of Jonathan Taylor, then I also want to upgrade something like multi-tiers. So I don't know who you have at tight end, but you should be asking for Kelsey or Andrews. Like, those are the 2 that you should be asking for if that player has them. So I'm not sure what else here, but I would, if this is in a vacuum, I would not do this. Okay. Okay. And it makes sense. Just not sure how Dak will be off the injury. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. but you've ridden with him so far. So, at this point, you've already ridden with Dak. Like it's sunken cost. Like if you wanted to make this move, you should have made it like week 2. Sorry. like that way you had, and you should have also traded, Dak in that deal to try to get him. Okay. He has Ertz. Should I toss him in? I mean, sure. It depends on how much of an upgrade it is for you at tight end. Like I don't, I know that Ertz has like some high floors, but I don't see Ertz getting a high ceiling, especially now that Rondell Moore is getting 10 targets. So there we go. Let's see here. Let's see. Ethan asked, what should I do with Wilson in my other league? I have Wilson, Marquise Brown, Jalen Waddle, Chubb, Dalvin, Higbee, Jacobs. Keep him. I think you're fine. you got some solid players there. If the only thing that I'm looking at here is maybe upgrading tight end, because I think Tyler Higbee, looking at what Higbee did this week, right? The Hig Beast. Like I'm scrolling through and I don't see his name even. Let me see if I can find it in the list. Higbee finishes as the tight end 45, 1.2 fantasy points, 1 catch for 7 yards. That's not going to get it done. So yes, Ethan, I would see if I can find a way to upgrade Tyler Higbee. Okay. RS German, we're getting to you finally. Thanks for your patience, bud. Feel good trading Hollywood for CD and Najee? Yes, I would. This is the sell high time for Marquise Brown. Although, hopefully the person is not paying attention to the Marquise Brown injury, because that put a damper on things. I was saying sell Marquise Brown last week because we are 1 week removed from DeAndre Hopkins. And look, I don't believe DeAndre Hopkins steps in and saves this Arizona Cardinals offense. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins steps in and says and earns a 27% target share or 33% target share like he was earning back in 2021 or 2020 in his first year in Arizona. I don't think he's that type of receiver anymore. So could I see both Marquise Brown and DeAndre Hopkins having like 22% target shares each? Yes, I could. But then that limits the Hollywood Brown ceiling spike weeks that we've seen. Like Hollywood has had a high floor and we've seen some ceiling games so far. So yes, I think better days are ahead for CeeDee Lamb. I think worse days are ahead for Marquise Brown, plus the injury. We don't know if Hollywood's going to miss some games due to the ankle injury. And then if you can get Najee Harris as well, yes. You're not sure when you're going to start Najee, but yes, I would do that. Smash right now if someone's offering me that. Okay. Let me see. All right. I'm going to pause here on some of the questions and I'm going to continue with it and then keep putting your questions in and then we'll get to them. We'll get to as many as we can. I want to finish the wide receivers and then do a couple tight ends, and then we'll see where we're at. I appreciate all of you checking this out. Make sure you're clicking the subscribe button too, right? If I'm answering your questions, you like the content, you're coming back for more, do yourself and do me a favor by clicking that subscribe button, the red button. It really means a lot to my channel, as I did start this channel in April. I was doing a lot of best ball content, but now that I'm in season, I wanted to do a lot more of interacting with the followers and giving my takes on players. So I'll be posting a lot of videos about players moving forward and getting my takes. And some of them I hit on and some of them I'll miss on. But for those who are wondering, who am I? My name's Bradley. You can follow me on Twitter at FFStalder as well. Click the subscribe button here on the YouTube. Make sure you're all caught up on the content. And for those who are unfamiliar with what I do or my background, I've been doing fantasy for like 10 years. dynasty, redraft, best ball, the whole bit. Lots of fun. I've done, or I've started to do a couple more high stakes leagues. We're getting into that a little bit more, but the last 2 years I've been in the Fantasy Pros Actually Rankings contest. Last year I finished 90th out of over 200 rankers, so in the top half, so not too bad. And then this year, I'm going into week 6, I'm 21st out of about 210 rankers. So I'm top 10 percentile, top 10 percentile of Fantasy Pros Actually Rankers. You can check out my rankings on Fantasy Pros, get the subscription there, and check out my rankings and then compare it to others of other of your favorite analysts. So there you go. All right, cool. And I appreciate all of you checking it out. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. It means a lot to my channel, making sure that it can grow and I can keep making content for you as the season goes on. I'm a man of the people. Okay. So putting out content that y'all will like. But I wonder how y'all will feel about this wide receiver, and that is Dante Pettis. Dante Pettis on Thursday, he's still the wide receiver 9 on the week. And I put out a tweet during the summer. I think it was July. Let me see if I can find the tweet real quick. But in the meantime, the question was, who's going to be the wide receiver 2 for the Chicago Bears behind Darnell Mooney? And, I suggested, well, maybe it's Dante Pettis. He played only a few games last year for the New York Giants, but where is he? Oh, that's not working. I'm not finding it. No. Let me see. Search FF Stalder Pettis. Okay, so here we go. Back on what is that? 7/4. So July 4th, I tweeted Dante Pettis should be a late round wide receiver consideration. A quote, feels gross, but 16% and 23% target shares last season in his 2 full games. ADP suggests more general optimism for Byron Pringle in this Bears offense, yet 10 of Pringle's 17 games consisted of a single-digit target share. So, Dante Pettis was someone that I took a couple stabs at very late if I was having some Justin Fields stacks in best ball. I think I drafted over like 300 best ball teams this offseason, and Dante Pettis ended up on a couple of the Bears stacks, finishes the wide receiver 9 on the week, despite losing to Washington. 4 receptions, 84 yards and a touchdown, 7 targets, and 7 of Justin Fields' 27 pass attempts. So we're talking a 25-ish% target share for Dante Pettis. And as we know, target share is one of the stickier stats in the NFL among wide receivers. So, 25 to 27% target share for Dante Pettis, that's an eyebrow raise. I'm not saying he's going to be even a wide receiver 3 consideration, but he was like wide receiver 70 in Fantasy Pros, and I think I bumped him up a little bit higher. But Dante Pettis should be a back-end wide receiver 4 consideration moving forward. Eyebrow raise, maybe. This at least makes me raise my eyebrows of, if it's not Darnell Mooney, could it be Dante Pettis? And he was a former second-round pick. Something just didn't click right in San Francisco. One of my first years in Dynasty. Actually, it was my first year in Dynasty. I was buying into the Dante Pettis hype, and I traded my first-round pick and Will Fuller at the time for Dante Pettis. Right, that is the trade I regret the most is Dante Pettis. But if he's found his little niche in Chicago, like a deep league waiver wire consideration, Dante Pettis, can't ignore 7 targets and a 27% target share. Yeah, and even against Washington too. So, not a lot of excitement, but when you're desperate for somebody, Dante Pettis. Okay, there you go. And the last wide receiver, Allen Lazard, finishes wide receiver 10. I had him at wide receiver 20 in my rankings, and looking at where Lazard, his Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking was, I had him at 20. Not ADP. I wanted rankings for half PPR. He was wide receiver 23. And let's see, I had him at wide receiver 21. I'm sorry. So I was above the consensus with wide receiver 21. So a little bit more optimistic. That was a pretty good call by me. There were only about 20 or 30 people who were higher on Allen Lazard than I was this week. So, wide receiver 10, Lazard getting 9 targets, 4 receptions. He caught the touchdown, 76 receiving yards. Randall Cobb suffered an injury. So I think it's going to be Lazard and Tonyan closer to the line of scrimmage, because 8.4 yards per target, that's about the same as what Michael Pittman was. I wonder if Lazard's going to be more of a safety valve along with Tonyan moving forward, if Cobb's going to miss some time. We know Amari Rodgers is not the answer. So, and Romeo Doubs seems to just be running like deep routes that he's not catching. He's not catching those deep targets. So Allen Lazard, I think, is wheels up as long as Randall Cobb is out. I think that he is a back-end wide receiver 2 moving forward. All right, we finished wide receivers. I'll do tight ends after I answer some more questions. Thoughts on Lamar Jackson? Better days ahead. G_the_X. Better days ahead. Lamar, he's going to have his good day. You have to understand, too, that Lamar doesn't have Rashad Bateman. That's just how it is. Lamar right now is the quarterback, 17 of 32, 53% completion, 77 rushing yards. He only had 1 passing touchdown. He had a pick, no rushing touchdowns. The Giants are a very tough defense. They are an underrated defense. That's what I've been saying. You cannot underestimate them. So I think better days are ahead for Lamar Jackson. Kenson said it picked up Dak off the waivers, rode with Carr. Yeah, Derek Carr, fine. He'll be a high-end quarterback 2, mid quarterback 2. That's what he always is. I only have Tonyan and Schultz. So, yeah, I would definitely try to upgrade. Although Tonyan, we'll talk about Robert Tonyan in the tight end section here in a moment. So yeah, we'll get to it. Lincoln asks, I traded Romeo for 23 second and Bellinger. What could I flip the second for? I am an older team, so that's why I want to trade the pick and Bellinger. Yeah, see if you can get so let's look at keep trade cuts for some ideas here. 2023 mid second round pick in Superflex. You could get the likes of a Khalil Herbert, Kareem Hunt, Elijah Mitchell. Ooh, okay, so here's an idea. Yeah, offer that 2023 second for Elijah Mitchell plus like a third round pick, or Elijah Mitchell plus a shot in the dark wide receiver, or maybe a buy low candidate like Marvin Jones Jr. I know he's been injured, but he's a player who can put up fantasy points. So I wonder if you can do something like that, because I do like Elijah Mitchell. For those who are just watching me for the first time, when I was with Billy Muzio of Full Time Fantasy, he and I had our podcast together, Fantasy Football Fanalists. And in that podcast a year and a half ago, before the NFL draft, we were all asked to submit who would be our James Robinsons, right? Our super deep sleepers. And I chose Elijah Mitchell before the NFL draft. And I said, if he gets the starting position, if he gets a starting role, he's not going to let it go. And he's going to be a dynamic player. If you look at what he did, even, in his lower level competition, still handled a lot of carries, ran for lots of yards, and had a really, really good combine. So maybe if you consider him, Kareem Hunt as well. Maybe you can get Kareem Hunt plus. Okay. So yeah, consider those. Okay, cool. Hall is crazy. Yeah, he is. Told my friend to pick up Walker. I'm kind of pissed. I knew this would happen. Should I trade Sanders and Cooper? Miles Sanders and Amari Cooper for Swift and Higgins? Yes. Yes, you should. DeAndre Swift consistently has, though, a top 12 wide receiver week within his range of outcomes without needing full complement of snaps. And I think T. Higgins over Amari Cooper all day, every day. Higgins is coming back from the ankle injury, but it's encouraging that he caught 6 passes on 10 targets despite being limited. He played like barely 50% of the snaps. So getting a high target share despite only being out there for a little bit. Yes, I definitely should. I would do that trade. I would want the Higgins side of that trade. Should I start D-Hop this week? My wide receivers are Debo, Amon-Ra, and Gabe. No, you should not. Debo is set. Amon-Ra should be back from his ankle injury. Looking at what some of the fantasy medical experts in the industry are saying about Amon-Ra, he should be back to full health in week 7. And Gabe Davis, no, you're not benching Gabe Davis for DeAndre Hopkins. Sorry, G_the X, not happening. Should I trade Elliott for Darrell Henderson? I wouldn't right now. If we find out that Christian McCaffrey gets traded to a different team, or that we pass the trade deadline in the NFL and Darrell Henderson has the backfield to himself, maybe. But I'm holding on to Elliott. I sent the trade Antonio Gibson for Pollard. Also, not to mention I have Ryan Robinson. He accepted, so shrug. Okay, there you go. Congrats, Ethan. Yay, celebrate. Okay, awesome. Let's finish this night off. I did not think this would be a 2-hour stream. Usually my streams are like 1 hour or 40 minutes or 30 minutes. I hop on, hop off. But, I'm stoked to do this. Let's kick it off with the tight end one on the week, and that is my boy, Mike Gesicki. Mike the Gritty Gesicki, because he's done the gritty. So if you haven't watched, you should watch the Mike Gesicki gritty videos. They're quite entertaining. He also had 7 targets, 6 receptions, 69 nice receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. And I have like 16% exposure to Mike Gesicki in my best ball leagues. It's like kind of bad because I was viewing Gesicki as a boom bust candidate. But if you read some of my Fantasy Pros articles this offseason, I identified Mike Gesicki as a player better suited for best ball leagues. Am I considering Gesicki and starting like as a starting tight end one? No. This is not Gesicki fits into that tight end one category. I'm going to start him over David Njoku or, a Kyle Pitts. No, I can't do that. Sorry. But I can get Mike Gesicki over the likes of even Dawson Knox right now. Mike Gesicki over Noah Fant. Mike Gesicki over Taysom Hill right now. If especially because Jameis was so close to playing, I think that Taysom Hill goes away mostly if Jameis is there. But Mike Gesicki has the spike week in him. He has the gritty in him, but he is not a consistent tight end one. Play him only if you're really, really desperate for upside. And then we'll talk about Mandrews. Mandrews and Kelsey fitting at tight ends 2 and 3. It's a flip of the coin. Like, Andrews won this week, but Kelsey had 4 touchdowns the previous week. Both 10 and 11 targets, both 7 and 8 receptions, both 106, 108 receiving yards. They're putting up virtually the same numbers on the same target share. It's just that Andrews happened to have the touchdown this week. Kelsey had 4 last week. So you're having fun playing Travis Kelsey and Mark Andrews in your tight end position. They are not disappointing. The tight end 4 on the week, Hunter Henry. And this was mostly on a broken play, a 31-yard reception for Hunter Henry, broken coverage for Cleveland, caught the touchdown and the reception. That 31-yard touchdown consisted of 9.6 of his 14.1 fantasy points. So it counted for about 2/3 of his fantasy points. Take that away, and you're looking at about 3 catches for 30 yards, which would put him at like 4.5 fantasy points, like tight end 22-ish instead of the tight end 4. So that one broken play, that's how it happens. Henry does sometimes have more of a knack for getting in the end zone, but I'm not starting him confidently as a tight end 1 moving forward. Now, what I am more confident in, and what I mentioned earlier in the live stream, is with Randall Cobb suffering what may be a serious ankle injury. He had his towel over his head. He had to be, carted off the field. Like Robert Tonyan getting 12 targets, 10 receptions, 90 yards. That is not typical Robert Tonyan stat lines that we've seen in the past. No, it's because Robert Tonyan's yards per target was 7.5. It's the lowest among any of the top 7 tight ends that at least so far going into Monday Night Football. So Robert Tonyan, tight end 5. I think that if he falls in the end zone, we're talking about a top 2, top 3 tight end on the week. So Tonyan has access to those tight end, or that those touchdowns can start him as a back end tight end 1 moving forward. So we talked about Daniel Bellinger. He's tied at tight end 6, 5 receptions, 38 yards, had the touchdown. Take away the touchdown, that is 6.2 fantasy points. That would get him to be like tight end 19. Okay. Yeah, if you can sell high and Daniel Bellinger, you should do it. I mean, Daniel Bellinger is getting the snaps. He is getting the routes run. It's just this is the classic. He scored a touchdown and he made it into the top 7 of tight ends because of the touchdown. George Kittle had his best day in 2022, 8 receptions, 80 yards, or 83 yards. 19 was his longest, 8.3 yards per target, 10.4 yards per reception, 12.3 fantasy points. This is encouraging for George Kittle. He had not put up more than 5.2 fantasy points until this game. I was lower on Kittle going into this game, but he's going to finish no worse than tied for tight end 8 on the week. So, I mean, he's if you have him, you're starting George Kittle. The tight end 8 is actually the tight end 9 because the tight end 8, since the update, is Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys, 4 receptions, 40 yards, and the touchdown. As I mentioned, Dalton Schultz was out for this game. So Jake Ferguson steps in. He's the one who got the 6 targets, 4 receptions. But Dawson Knox, the tight end 8, 3 catches on 3 targets, 37 yards, and the touchdown. This is where we're getting into these back end tight end 1s who are touchdown dependent. And then the tight end 9 on the week, well, now tight end 10, Zach Ertz, 10 targets, 7 receptions, 70 yards. So 10.5 fantasy points. And Zach Ertz, low average depth of yards per target, 7 yards per target, 10 yards per reception. His longest was a 32-yard catch, but that comprised of nearly half of his receiving yards on that one catch. Take away that one catch, he has 6 receptions for 38 yards, averaging about 6 yards per reception. That's not too good. That's not too good. Zach Ertz, a safety valve for Kyler Murray, not a dynamic weapon in this Cardinals offense. And the tight end 10 on the week, now tight end 11 with the addition of Jake Ferguson, is Jelani Woods, 2 receptions, 27 yards, 1 touchdown. This was not a Mo Alley Cox week. Alley Cox did not show up in the top 50 of tight ends for this week. This just so happened to be a Jelani Woods week. It's Jelani Woods, it's Kylan Granson, it's Mo Alley Cox. We don't know who the tight end is. Just when we thought it was Mo Alley Cox, Cox does nothing, and then or Allie Cox does nothing, and then Jelani Woods is the one who puts up the tight end one performance this week, gets the touchdown. So be it. All right, that brings us to the end of the live stream. Make sure you're clicking the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. It really helps me grow this channel, continue to push out content. It's encouraging for me. It also helps, other people see this content as well. So I appreciate all the comments, all the questions, all the views. You can follow me on Twitter at FFStalder. You can throw some questions in my DMs there. You comment on the videos that I make. And in the meantime, I appreciate all of you. It's been great. This has been a lot of fun. In the meantime, good luck, everybody who need a Monday night miracle. And we'll talk waivers here in a couple days. Have a good one, everybody.